and creating content. And I would say I certainly didn't start out as a natural that some people have been so kind and gracious to say about me. So
Well, you've been in that like continuous improvement space before you went out and started the Chrysler Club. Can you talk a little bit about what made you jump and say, okay, it's time to go start my own thing?
yeah, I mean, for me, like, and I've told this story before, but I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and so I kind of always knew at some point I would find my way back. I didn't necessarily have it, kind of well planned out. There was, a period of transition, and as I was kind of doing some soul searching of, what's next in life. I landed on this because for me, I really spent my entire career kind of getting opportunities to solve problems that kept coming back.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of that draw of the ability to do that in an effective way and to kind of tap into the curiosity that I've always had throughout life. And to take kind of my lens of experience, having done this now for 30 years, and apply that in a scenario that I could help a variety of other businesses, kind of not just learn through the hard lessons that I learned through, but to really help them kind of speed things up, right? Like move further faster and not have to go through that same series of lessons and trajectory. So
I love that you are from a family of entrepreneurs. Like, I know that was something, and specifically a printing company too,
mhm.
right? So, fun fact for everybody: James couldn't join us today. He had a conflict. I scheduled over him, so I had to come solo to this one. But that was something that you and James found out really quickly when you met
Yeah.
for the first time. That you guys both come from families of entrepreneurs, but specifically of printing entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I'm on the other side with like glass blowing as the entrepreneurship. We've got some pieces from my dad's days as
So
a
cool.
glass blower and that business, but it is something that sticks with you. And it's, I guess it falls in families of doctors and lawyers too, where you see these
Yeah.
like large genealogies of people going into the same field. And it seems like it sticks for those of us that grew up like in the office watching our parents do stuff when we were kids and
Yeah.
kind of having that spirit to us. So you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier at the very beginning that you were not a natural when you started content, and I don't think there's very many people that are. Like, I mean, and not necessarily that they're not good at it and they don't
Yeah.
seem natural on camera, but I would argue that almost nobody feels supernatural when they're
Yeah.
like, "Hey, let me pick up this phone and stare at it and talk to myself." And so but I'd love to hear about what kind of made you make that jump to starting to create content and how that became a part of how you grow your business.
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate when I kind of left my corporate job. I had an opportunity to work with a pretty well-known marketing agency, and I'll kind of never forget. It's just part of this journey of creating content, kind of stepping out on my own. But I'll never kind of forget being in this conference room in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and people prompting and asking questions about my history and background, all the different things that I've ever, kind of done. And I'll never forget kind of saying, like, well, who wants to hear anything about what I've done? Like, this is like the most boring work, possible, right? Like, and it was really quick as I started to tell some different stories of, whether it was culture changes or, kind of systemization, problem solving, any of the different, aspects and things that I had been responsible for up to that point. And everybody was just like, what are you talking about that you don't have something to share? Like, this is the people love this stuff, And I'm like, it just took a really long time for me to kind of connect those dots. But that was the start of it for me. It was somebody literally just saying, like, you're nuts, like you have so much stuff to talk about and to share and to tell. And what really kind of put it into perspective for me is just the fact that there are people starting out that I am ahead of, and there are people that I look up to that are ahead of me. and putting it into that perspective from a, sharing the things that you've learned. That's something that kind of really helped me and has stuck with me through the course of time. And it also helps to kind of shape like the stuff that I talk about and put out there. Because again, we when we live this life, you take it for granted. You take for granted all the things that you've experienced, the mistakes you've made, the kind of stories that become fuzzy because you live through the details of them. And so yeah, that was the kind of start of it, and it's been a journey ever since, so to speak.
I love that you were like, "Oh, is anybody even gonna," like, that verbatim was what came out of my mouth. So I joke back, like, and this was still well before we started the business, when I was in software sales, during COVID, James was my own personal consultant as opposed to working with all of our clients all the time. And we were talking, and I was like, how do I get back in front of people? Like, how do
Yeah.
I? No one's answering phones. No one's phones are forwarding to like their cell phones, like early days of
Yeah,
COVID
yeah.
timeframe. And he was like, why don't you try video? And immediately I was like, who's going to watch video about digital transformation?
Right.
I just like the concept that someone was going to be all about that. And he was like, well, you do. And I was like, oh, you're right. I do.
Yeah.
And the rest is history now, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's just like you don't realize that you maybe have the message that someone else needs to hear in that moment, because you're so caught up in what you're learning or the challenges that you've got going on, that you don't recognize how much you have to teach other people.
Yeah.
I know I asked if we had any other children of entrepreneurs or other folks out there, and it looks like we're celebrating a 5-year business anniversary in the comments. So, congratulations.
Very
That's
cool. That's
awesome.
exciting.
And okay, so we obviously just talked about like your brand and content, and that's how you and I were able to get connected in the first place,
Yeah.
and how that then snowballed to James getting involved in the friendship and now turning into this opportunity to come forward. And I think come forward in the sense of like sitting on the panel at IGNiTE and helping us share this information and kind of this approach to other people. Um, what has what's the impact of you creating this kind of content and putting yourself in this position of kind of stepping outside your comfort zone and doing something that you weren't sure if people were going to like support or like? What's that done for you and the business at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been kind of the lever that's helped me grow the business. I mean, without putting myself out there, without creating content, without getting comfortable on camera, whether it's doing live streams, video DMs, right? Like whatever it kind of is in the detail, I wouldn't have a business. That's the reality of it. I mean, the willingness to kind of tell your story, to reach out, to make connections virtually, right? To your point about COVID, I mean, I started my business literally weeks before COVID shut the world down, and I was coming out of a scenario having worked in a mid-market sized business where I did a ton of internal networking within that business. I
Mhm.
knew a tremendous amount of people inside of that business, and maintain a lot of those relationships today. The thing I didn't have was a lot of external connections. And when you leave that environment, and at least this was my story, is kind of you quickly realize, boy, I don't know anybody. And, so for me, it was like, it was kind of, this survival instinct to some extent where, if I don't do this, and even if I can't turn it into a business that I've dreamed of, this will at least be an avenue to make additional connections, to get me in front of people and potentially build a relationship where somebody wants to hire me. Right. So in my mind, it was kind of the only answer. And I just had to figure out, how do you get comfortable? How do you find things to talk about when this is my life? I've lived it, every day. So to me, it's just like, I don't know. That's just Tuesday. Like there's nothing special about that story, right? And so yeah, that's really what it was though. And again, just to reiterate, right? Like without stepping out and doing this stuff, and learning the things that I have, and from you and James, and just how you guys talk about sharing content and creating I wouldn't have a business today. I'd probably be working for somebody else. I probably would have never, had the kind of thought leadership and personal brand building that again people, are very kind and say very nice things to me about. So
But I think there's 2 pieces that I wanna kind of, like, go into.
yeah,
One is that concept of, like, you show up and you share what's happening on a Tuesday. You share what's going on in your business, and I do feel like when I read your content or I see a video from you, it feels like you.
yeah,
And I think that that's a really key component here of not trying to feel like you have to fit into the shape of somebody else or do the things now. And I say this to our clients all the time. You don't have to make an ass out of yourself on the internet the way that I do sometimes. Like, you don't have to dance, you don't have to make
yeah,
skits, you don't have to like do lip sync videos or meme content. You do what feels right to you. And that looks different for everybody. And the way that you show up is different from how I do, or is different from James or some of the other speakers who I would say like ratchet up the characterization, like
yeah.
Curtis, who was with us at the event
Oh,
last year and will
yeah,
be there again this year. Like, he takes it to a different level of extreme, like bringing out fireworks on the ski-doo while we're making a video to promote the event. Like, if you haven't seen that one, guys, check out Curtis's profile and I'll be posting it soon again too. But he enjoys doing that, and that
yeah.
makes content fun for him. Doing it to that extreme would be too much for me. And, even in the making of that video, I hit James with a lighter and cut him in the face. Like, clearly, we're not cut out for extreme content creation over here in the roll off house.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I love, like, telling stories through analogy. So, like,
Yeah,
trending sounds and that kind of content is so fun to me. But I think, like, the part that connects with people and the part that makes people say, like, "Oh, Dave, you're so natural at this,"
yeah,
is that it's you and you're just showing up and sharing that knowledge. And I think that that is such an important thing to, like, really drive home here for everybody who's listening to us, is that it's working as well as it is for you because you do it as yourself.
yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, just quick story. I recently met somebody that I had never met in person. We've been connected for several years. And, literally in the first 10 seconds, her comment was, "You're exactly who I imagined you would be in all of our interactions, now kind of meeting for the first time in person." And, well, of course I am because it's just
I
me,
hope
right?
so.
Like, I mean, but what is interesting about that perspective and to your point is that I think that's what makes content challenging, or what people perceive as to be challenging, because they see virality and they see other people doing things. And yes, you can utilize that for inspiration, but I say, whatever draws you, right? Like, if you love to write and you really struggle on video, then start writing. Start on Substack, start a newsletter, right? Like, whatever it is, start just writing content on LinkedIn or X or whatever platform you choose, and don't force it. Get yourself comfortable. Still stretch yourself, still try new ideas, because you never know the things that might, really ignite your creativity. See what I did there?
I do
Uh,
see what you did there.
but like that's the thing. I get inspired. Like, I met Curtis for the first time last year, right, at IGNiTE, and it's inspiring. John, right? Like, it's
Mhm.
it's it's inspiring to see how other people show up and what they're able to do. And instead of kind of comparing yourself and saying, boy, maybe I should do a lip syncing music video, probably not, because that's just not me. Like, you're not going to see me doing karaoke, right? Like, that's just not who I am. And, but you will probably see dry sense of humor. You probably, will hear about all of the different lessons and, applied to how I learned something, right? Because that's how I think about things. That's how, boy, if I could go back in time, I wish, I would have already known this piece, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think that's challenging though for people starting out, especially because they see big personalities or they see specific things and they think, oh, in order to get any traction, I have to do this, and that feels really scary and uncomfortable to me.
Well, and I think there's a point here too about that concept of virality versus really valuable content.
Mhm.
And that's not to say that something that goes viral can't be really valuable,
Yeah.
or spark good conversations or give you good insights into something. But the goal of virality strictly for extra eyeballs doesn't necessarily do anything for your business. Speaking to the problems that you see your customers having and speaking specifically to how they can solve those problems, and even sometimes giving away enough information where it makes you feel uncomfortable with like how much you are sharing, leads to more opportunity for you,
Yeah.
because when it lands on someone's feed, it's valuable enough where they decide that they maybe want to work with you or they want to continue to follow you, and then 6 videos down the line they decide they want to work with you. And I feel like that also, I mean, it's hard when you are creating and you think to yourself, "Oh man, I put in all this effort. I got, let's say, 100 views." But, like, the one thing that I always force myself to do when I'm in those scenarios and I start getting, like, caught up in all of those vanity metrics is being like, "What would it feel like to be in a room with all 100 of those people?"
Yeah.
And, like, what if you were in a room with all 100 of those people and 2 of them decided that what you gave them was really valuable? You would feel happy if you gave a presentation to 100
Yeah.
people and 2 people came to talk to you afterward,
Yep.
or 5 people came to tell you what you did mattered. But, like, we've tricked ourselves into believing that for it to be valuable, it has to have, like, this massive, massive scale. Now, there's benefit to the scale that comes with all of this because you can't necessarily get 100 people from around the world in one room instantly without the internet. So that scale matters and can be really valuable. But we talk about that a lot within like our Catalyst community. I know we talked about it at the event last year that like getting the right 2 people to see something means a lot more than having 5 million people see it.
Yeah.
And, like, speaking from experience, I've had videos go viral and do really well that have done absolutely nothing for our business,
Yeah.
and I
Same.
would rather have the right couple of people see it than, not, and so or, like, than a million of the wrong people.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, what's interesting about where, some of the analytics sit today with LinkedIn is, recently they opened up the kind of detailed look in terms of like in network, out of network, right? And what you'll end up finding is that the pieces that do go viral, your out of network is 90 plus percent, right? And so it's this idea that you're showing something that is attention worthy, right? Like in the eyes of strangers, which is just really to like a fancy way to say that it's it's like it's just fodder, right? It's
Mhm.
just like you know, it's either controversial, it's something funny or cute, right? It's just something to break away the monotony of the day. And that's the whole intent behind it. So, to your point, right? Like if we're trying to grow our business, if we're trying to show up as, thought leaders or we're building a personal brand, I would much, much rather have a small number of people with a high number of engagements, whether that's on post or inbound or something that spurs an additional conversation or touch point. Because ultimately, that's what's going to help me grow my business. That's what's going to help me build a stronger personal brand. And I think, unfortunately, to your point, we've confused like growing a personal brand or having a strong personal brand or building a business. We've confused that with like popular people we see,
Mhm.
and they've amassed this audience. And, boy, if I only have, 1,000 people, in my audience, so to speak, like I'm not as valuable. And the direct opposite, at least I've found, is true, because you really only need, depending on the size of your business, right? Like I would argue too, right? You have 5 million views. Like if you got 1% of that to convert, it would implode most businesses,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like they couldn't handle that influx of orders or business. So again, we trick ourselves to thinking like that's the thing, and it's just not. So
And so I want to kind of like also dive into this concept of like increasing leads and what your personal brand can do there. And I
Yeah.
think that this relates nicely. And I'm gonna say something to our fabulous Weston who's off screen and see if maybe he can help me with this on the fly. But maybe we can put up a QR code to our buyer survey because some of this information came up in that recently as well. So hang tight because I just threw that curveball at Weston who's helping us off screen. But the buyer survey that we did recently, we surveyed a ton of executives that are in our network. And we did it specifically handpicking people that are sitting in like the C suite or are entrepreneurs and are making purchase decisions to understand how they're actually making their decisions, what's influencing them, what are they doing before they meet with a vendor, all sorts of information. But one of the things that came out of it, and I actually got into a little bit of a debate and had to step away from the comments because arguing in the comments doesn't actually ever win for you. But the information came back that referrals are number one in
Yeah.
terms of like where executives are finding who they're working with. And then it proceeded to talk about like, then like up next was mentioned was like industry events, industry publications, and then LinkedIn. And my thought process on looking at that is, at least in my experience, and this is what I want to hear from you as well, Dave, is LinkedIn isn't a generate leads quick platform. LinkedIn is a spot where I get the opportunity to build trust by showing up consistently and build authority by helping people like solve their problems and showing up with the knowledge that I've built, showing up and teaching other people. And then from there, that's when I have somebody who sees a piece of content that reaches out. There we go, Weston with the magic. Thank you very much. So the buyer survey, what I was just talking about, is here in this QR code if you want to download it. But that like that is when somebody from an industry publication says, "Hey, we're doing an article on this. Would you mind giving me a quote?" Or, "Hey, I saw your video on this. You did a really great job of showing me this. Can you like come in and engage with us at this level?
Yeah.
Hey, we'd love to have you moderate a panel, sit on a panel, do a keynote." And then all of a sudden you get into those spots where you are in the industry publications without having to pay to be there. You
Yeah.
are on a stage without having to put forward lots and lots of money for that sponsored spot to be on that stage. You get to then all of a sudden be in the room at those events with those executives who see you and know you and feel like they know you, like you were talking about, so that when they have met you, even if they haven't done business with you, the next time someone's looking for somebody and says, "Who do you think I should talk to?" they'll say your name when you're not in the room. And so when we talk about LinkedIn as a lead source, yeah, you could be hitting DMs hard, but like how many of us are actually reading cold pitches that are coming into our DMs? LinkedIn is about building trust. It's not like a quick, I'm going to get 5,000 leads because I had a couple of posts. And I think that that is, when I look at that and I think back to that conversation, I had like a whole like, but here, think about it this way. And I'm like, well, if
Yeah.
he's not going to put the time in because he sees 6% of people are starting at their starting point with LinkedIn and he doesn't understand like the flywheel that's created, I'm not going to be able to convince him that it's worth the time. But it's a long-term strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
told,
have
oh, God.
Oh, I was gonna say there's a very big, very big comment here. I'm not even sure if all of it's gonna come up, but there's something strangely powerful about giving away genuinely valuable information. It doesn't make people think, "Why would I pay them?" It makes them think, if this is what they're willing to share for free, imagine the value that I can get from them. And I could
Totally
not
agree.
say that any more eloquently. And I have to go back and look at who the comment came in from LinkedIn because right now it shows up as LinkedIn user. So I will find you and I will thank you for
I
being
will
very
find you.
insightful in a moment.
Yeah.
Oh, it was Ian. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, that is spot on exactly what you were saying, Emma. I mean, it's been my experience, right? Like one of the things that I've learned in creating content, specifically on LinkedIn for, the last 8 years now, regularly, I'll say, right? Like I was a LinkedIn user prior to, but not super active. But to your point, it Yeah, if you're seeking virality, if you are thinking about the platform in the sense that you're going to show up there and just generate a massive either inbound leads and or you're going to do outbound outreach there and generate a ton of, significant business, I would disagree with that, right? But where it's extremely valuable is, the what you guys talk about, right? It's the teach, don't tell. It is showing up and leading with value. It's constantly giving things away, just like Ian shared, right? It's giving things away and imagine what, value you could bring if you actually paid me, right?
Mhm,
And I think the thing that really, helped me think about my LinkedIn activity is that a couple of things. So, and I tell this to people that I meet that are, kind of like either early in their consulting business or, they're trying to become more visible for a variety of reasons. The best value, in my opinion, is to be active in the comments, to add value in the comments, and then you can, create content and share things in a variety of lenses. And when I started to think about, the content that I create, what am I really trying to do with this, right? Like, so instead of the, boy, I'd love, a million eyeballs on this, I want to create something for somebody that has a very specific problem,
mhm,
right? And so if I follow that person, right, or that persona, let's talk a little bit, more marketing speak, right? But if I follow somebody and I engage with that person and they're in my, ICP, there's a really good chance that that piece of content I created is going to find its way into their feed. Right.
mhm,
And so that to me is the flywheel that you're creating. So that way, when you do connect with that person, when you do send them that video DM, right, you're not a stranger cold pitching to them. You're Dave, who just
mhm.
shared this really crazy tip that they tried to implement and got stuck. Right?
Yeah,
Or right, even better, had a really, really crazy win because of something that they learned, right?
mhm,
And so it just starts the conversation, right? So you move away from the cold DM pitch and the pitch slap that nobody responds to, an acquaintance, a friend, somebody that's already been helpful, somebody that's already thought provoking, getting people to think or see their problem or situation through a different lens. And so that's the value of showing up consistently, right? In my opinion. And those are the things that lead to business opportunities or speaking engagements or article mentions or any of those things. Back to, what I said in the beginning of the episode, what value, what result has happened for like I wouldn't have the opportunities that I have had that have come inbound, by the way,
mhm,
a vast majority of them, had I not started to put myself out there and to create content and be consistent and to, iterate and learn and just show up and, be participatory. So I think that's the big takeaway, I love what Ian said there. And, again, just to riff on that for a second, um, there's no shortage of information. There's no shortage of, tools or things to buy, right? The stuff that helps you stand out, the stuff that makes people think about you from a referral perspective for any type of opportunity, in my opinion, is, getting to know you. And the best place to do that is, putting yourself out into the world, right? So,
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, that, like, know, like, trust is
yeah,
what the comment that I put up there, that, like, KLT, um, the best compliment that you can get, and we've already kind of circled this idea, but is, like, meeting someone and having them say that they feel like they know you.
yeah,
And then my favorite follow-up to that is then when someone proceeds to tell you about, like, the specific video or the specific post or the concept that you helped them, like, nail. And there is no better feeling in my mind, I'm convinced of it, than when you have somebody in your mind and you're thinking of creating content that will help them.
yeah,
That ICP, you've got that idea. We always talk about, just like, think about your favorite customer. Who's the
yep,
person that you want to have more of in your business? Who do you click well with? Who do you work well? And we all know those customers and we know what it feels like to find the right fit. And so if you start to create content for that customer, and then all of a sudden, somebody who falls perfectly into that, and sometimes even the person that you're like specifically thinking of ends up sending you an inbound DM of like,
Yeah.
hey, and I have had this happen recently where it's like, hey, this specific post made me think about this differently, and here's how we're bringing it into the business. And that person hasn't started working with us yet.
Yeah.
But down the line, when there's a need and there's something that we might be able to help them with, I hope that we come to mind because we helped them think about something different. And even if we don't, how cool is that? Like, and that's
Yeah.
my teacher brain, but like, how cool is that? That the knowledge and the things that you've gained can help somebody else by just simply taking a step to make yourself uncomfortable and get out there and do something that maybe feels a little spooky.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
But,
want to,
oh, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's kind of like, there's no better medicine than just, showing up and trying it, right? Because what's the worst that could happen?
Mhm.
Like in all of the years that I have made content, sure, there's some people that have, left not nice things or, comments, those types of things. But to me, they're few and far between. And the benefit far outweighs any sort of judgment or maybe negative things that people will say or share. And at the end of the day, right, it's just a reflection on where they're at in life or in their journey, and
Mhm.
it has nothing to do with you, right? So you just shake that off and you keep showing up and doing it. But that's the secret, right? Like that's the magic. It's not the flash in the pan. It's not going to be something that you just amass this big following or audience overnight. And if you do, I would argue that they're probably not people that are going to be real additive in the in the
Oh,
in the
yeah.
bigger picture of things, right? So to me, it's just think about how many genuine connections and relationships can I build, and that's the circle I want to build. Those are the people I want to be around. Those are the people I want to have on my show, that I'd like to participate on their shows. Those are the people that ultimately become the circle that all of this stuff is for. I've met lifelong friends
Mhm.
doing this, right? Like it's just that part is incredible. And if you approach it from that perspective, like I don't see how you couldn't be inspired to start doing this, because it really can change your life in a variety of ways, not just monetarily.
Mhm.
It can certainly do that, but the value of the personal relationships and friendships that you're able to build, um you know that part is the coolest. So
And I think that's something that surprises people a lot is that it feels like stuff stays at a surface level. And like, yeah, if you look at comments that I make on, again, let's go back to Curtis's posts, they don't always seem super insightful, but like he and I are good friends that
yeah.
talk on a regular basis. He works with, like, he's in the Catalyst community. We see him, a couple of times a month. That's where the real relationship is,
Yep.
not necessarily only living in those comments, but it was built from getting connected, seeing the content that he was creating, getting to work with him on stuff. John Lindsay is another really great example of that. I don't work in the legal space. I am not in a position to buy the solutions that he's selling, but now we've got a relationship that's lasted 5 years, and he came with us and he was there to support us for the event and share his knowledge. And there's so many other people that I could go on to talk about, like how big of an impact they've had on me individually as a person, but also on the business and our ability to grow it and come up with different ways to help people.
Yeah.
And know other people like yourself that are going through it that we can like talk to about what it means to run a business. And all of those things from the outside might look surface level because I'm not in your comments every single time, because LinkedIn doesn't always allow me to see the posts that
Right.
are coming
Right.
out from the
Yeah.
people I want to watch. But when I do, like I hope that there's like some insights back and forth, or again, these opportunities that we then have years later
Yeah.
to be able to call you and be like, hey Dave, we'd love for you to come teach people stuff at our event. Like, how cool is that? Again, I'm like getting excited about it
Yeah.
from my perspective, but the power that comes from it and is so incredible. I want to slightly change directions though before we run out of time today, because
Yeah.
the Ignite Digital Leadership Summit isn't just about content, right? Now, you're going to be sitting on our panel with a handful of other business leaders that are going to be talking about content, how it's impacted your leadership style, how it's impacted the business, and a lot more stories from that standpoint of everybody who's living and breathing this life of being a digital leader. But one of the things that I think you and I like both see very eye to eye on is this concept of like purpose. And a lot of the content that you create is obviously about continuous improvement, but also like change management and having like a people lens on the way that we lead. And that is a very key component of digital leadership as well, and will be a key component of what we're talking about at the event. Um, how does purpose show up in your content, but also the way that you lead your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think, ultimately it's the thing that drives, right? And the way that I try to think about it and try to show up is, I have what I like to call my so what filter, you know, and there's just so much, again, there's so much information, there's so many different perspectives on things, and I'm certainly not showing up with the idea that my kind of lens of experience is the only perspective. But what I'm trying to do is when I see something or I'm about to put something out into the world, right, I try to measure it up against the so what. It's just like, "Hey, Dave, that's great information, so what?" Like, what do I do tomorrow? Like, how does this impact my world? How do I move outside of, dealing with, Susie that just called out sick, and, these 10 hot, priority jobs, and, all the other madness that I'm dealing with on a day to day. And so for me, I'm trying to lead with that, and show up in a sense that somebody can do something with, this thing that I'm about to share. Um, and I think, kind of letting that lead, what you're thinking about, how you're, kind of building your content strategy, and again, all the way down to the things that you're posting. For me, that's kind of like how I'm trying to think about, that greater purpose, because, as I say, right, like the real value that I'm bringing is the 30 years of doing the work. It's not theory, it's every day, living in the trenches. It was the guy that showed up after an acquisition closed and, had to figure out, all right, hey, I'm Dave, like, great to meet you. Like, here's all the stuff that we need to work on. And it's like, what, who is this guy, and what does he think he's going to change? Like, this is the way we've always done it here. This guy doesn't know anything, right? Because I was, the young guy leading, a team of older people that had been there for, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, right? And I was this new person coming into an organization, right? So to me, it's all of those things. It's, taking those lessons and trying to apply them in a sense that feels approachable to people, because I understand, like, hey, it'd be great if we could just, throw all the stuff we actually have to do out the window and just sit around and chant kumbaya. But we got orders to ship today, right? And I got all these other things happening. So yeah, for me, that's what I try to let lead, the things that come out, and that I'm putting out, from a pure content perspective.
So I got a couple of minutes here. I want to say two things to the audience. Number
Yeah,
one, we've got the nice little like runner. I don't know exactly what to call it. Ticker at the bottom
yeah,
here. But
yep.
if you are interested in joining us in Weston's throwing in the words for me into the chat so that I don't sound stupid on the live stream. Thank you, Weston. Too late. But if you would like to join us in person on September 3rd for the event in Madison, Wisconsin, we will be giving away a ticket as a part of this Spark series. Each one of the episodes, we have given away a ticket. So if you're interested in joining us, throw some fire emojis into the chat And if LinkedIn tries to ask you, are you sure you want to put that in? Because I just got that notice when I was putting the comment in. It was like, are you sure this could be seen as offensive? No one is going to find the fire emoji offensive in this chat. So throw it in there, ignore LinkedIn, and let us know if you'd like to join us for the event. And then, kind of a last call for questions. If you have stuff that you want to talk to Dave about, throw that into the comments as well. I have one big question for you. And I love hearing everybody's like individual definition of this because I think it's a little bit of a moving target right now. But like, what does digital leadership mean to you? Like, what is your working definition of that concept?
Yeah, I think it ties into kind of where I was going with the purpose, right? For me, it's all about, what's the result, right? Like, what are we trying to drive towards? And so for me, being kind of a digital leader is about showing up consistently, sharing things that I hope inspire people, sharing things that I hope lets people kind of know that, like I've shared about growing pains of growing your own business, right, or family things. And I think for me that's what it's about. It's like I heard somebody share this concept of like whole person content, right? And I just kind of love how that encapsulates what to me being a digital leader is all about, and being consistent with that, and just letting people know that kind of like I said earlier, I am further along than other people that are trying to do similar things, right? They're trying to grow in their leadership role. Maybe they're interested in acquiring a bunch of businesses. Maybe they're just starting out, moving from operator into leadership, right?
Mhm.
And then I'm behind people that I admire, people that are showing up consistently and building larger audiences, that have a bigger business than mine, that are growing their business in different ways, different product lines, different service levels, right? So for me, it's being in that kind of continuum of understanding, I'm where I'm at today and I'll be in a different place tomorrow. So I have the responsibility to lead people that want to be where I'm at today. And I have an equal kind of opportunity to stay curious, to stay humble, to be excited and learn from the people that are further ahead than me, and, helping me to achieve my goals.
I think that concept of like whole person content is really interesting. And we've had another guest, Dr. Julie Gerner, came on for a conversation with James and I probably a little over a year ago. We talked a little bit about like imposter syndrome and the concept of what she called smart authenticity, which I feel like is a little bit of this same idea of like showing up, and not every detail of your life needs to be on
Yeah.
the internet, and I would argue not every detail of your life should be on the internet. But you have to give people enough to connect with you as a person, and like show enough of that journey and show enough of who you are as a person that gives people a way to truly connect with you. And so, like, yeah, little moments that happen here and there in life. And I think, there's like the quintessential, like people who will, I've probably ended up on one of those like LinkedIn cringe, like interpretive readings on some other platform that I didn't know about. But like that's how life works. Is like you
Yeah.
do learn things from your life that you apply to other areas, and you learn things from being a parent that apply to how you lead an organization, or experiences that you have impact the way that you show up. And I do think that that piece of it is really important. Before we break, I'm going to keep you here for a minute, Dave. We've got another question. How do you stay on top of content and staying consistent with your strategy? Because it does take a lot of work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I mean, I talk a lot about systems, right? So I have an entire content system that I built out that helps me not just, kind of track and maintain, right? But ideate, kind of draft, publish, the entire workflow, because yeah, it does require discipline to be consistent in your effort. And it's not just the consistency that drives it, right? Like you and James saw, I mean, you need a strategy behind it. You can't just, post kind of whatever you're feeling every single day. I mean, you can, right? Like there's no rules against it. I should start there, right? But, if ultimately you're trying to build your personal brand, kind of show up and build that, digital leadership, that thought leadership authority, you did, my opinion, you do need to be moving in a direction, right? You need to
Mhm,
identify some content pillars, some things to be talking about that capture that whole person content. And so for me, I've spent a really a tremendous amount of time kind of building the infrastructure that allows me to do that. And that's why, again, people are very kind with their words to me, but that's why you see me a lot, and I'm active because I've built a system that supports what kind of determined that I need to do from a
mhm.
consistency and kind of participation level. So yeah,
You
happy to
mentioned the
share more about that in detail at the summit. This, that if anybody's interested. So
Yeah, and you mentioned, like, the concept of, like, content pillars and that type of thing. I
yeah,
think there's 2 things that I would say to anybody that's like, "Yikes, I don't know if I can stay consistent," is 1, it doesn't have to start with 5 or 7 days a week.
yeah,
I think that, like, to build a brand and to show up regularly, to be in the top 1% of people that are creating content on LinkedIn, you need to show up once a week. And it is far, far, far better for you, your business, and longevity sake to get good at showing up once a week, every single week, and then step up to 2
yeah,
or 3. And if you get to the point where you're at 5 times a week, great. More than that, perfect. When it comes to LinkedIn, I'm typically posting during the week. Unless something really inspirational strikes me during the weekend, I'm staying to the weekdays because that's like what I've decided is appropriate there. Other platforms I post more regularly, and other platforms are a bit more like stream of consciousness for me. But that's how I work, and that's what works
yeah,
for me. I know other people that have like full month content calendars, or people, I get excited about something when I create it and I post it. Like
yeah,
I just like know my personality. But I think the biggest piece is like picking what's going to work with for you and what's going to be able to stay consistent. It's kind of like working out. If you go to the gym every single day and go as hard as you can 7 days a week, and you're just starting out, you're going to get to day 7 and your body is going to be so fatigued, and you're going to like not see any results, but you're going to feel like you were pushing it as far as you could and you're going to peter out. Same thing is true with content. Everyone I know who's done one of those like 30-day content challenges gets to the end of it and they don't want to do it anymore because
yeah,
it was too much too quick. So build into it. And then the other piece is those content pillars, but also like one of the things that I think beyond just deciding on topics and concepts for those content pillars, when you're first getting started, I always suggest to people to pick content types for each day of the week too. So you've got pillars that you're operating in and like topics that you want to talk about. But like when I very first started, I had Monday podcast review days where like I would listen to a
yeah,
podcast on Sunday and fold close and then like suggest that people listen to it or talk about something that I learned or create some piece of content that was tied to that. And that made it so like I didn't always know exactly what I was posting on Monday, but I knew how I was going to get to the idea. Same
yeah,
thing with like Fridays, once upon a time, were TikTok videos where they were like a little bit more ridiculous and like that analogy side of things. But that then helped me say, like, okay, so like I know that I'm going to come up with that kind of video for a Friday. And it just takes away a little bit of like the juice that's needed to get the engine going from a creativity standpoint to be like, oh no, what am I going to create? Like,
yeah,
dude, no, on Mondays I post this kind of video or this kind of content. On Tuesdays I do this, which was Tuesdays were always my interview series. So I still had to source the guests, I still had to do the other things, but at least I knew that that type of content was what was going to be created. And I've found for my brain that just that like little kickstart makes a really big difference in trying to like keep consistent with the content.
oh yeah,
Um, but more to come on that at IGNiTE in September from Dave. And then also, if you're looking for any tools and that kind of thing, if you're on our website in our resource section, we have a couple of different things that'll help you through like the creation of some of that. But Dave, thank you so much for joining us for the conversation today.
yeah.
And even more thank yous for coming to Madison again to see us in a month. And again, last reminder, even if you're watching this later, I'm going to choose ticket giveaway tomorrow morning. So feel free to drop some flames if you're watching this later, or any other questions, because we can come back and interact with you, because the beauty of the internet. But Dave, I'm so excited to have you back with us in
Yeah.
Madison on September 3rd. And thank you everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful day.